I'm presenting to you just 6 selected climate indicators which act like a little peephole into what is happening in our physical environment. All these indicators are, of course, interrelated, and what I'm attempting to do with this exercise is to try and provide a little insight, like the 6 blind men who experience different aspects of an elephant. How many of us know that every 6 seconds, the world loses a soccer field equivalent of primary forest? So during the 1 hour of our session when I'm speaking, we would have lost 600 soccer fields equivalent of primary forest, which works out to over 1,000 acres. According to new data from the University of Maryland and available on Global Forest Watch, the tropics lost 11.1 million hectares of tree cover in 2021. Of particular concern are the 3.75 million hectares of loss that occurred within tropical primary rainforests, areas of critical importance for carbon storage and biodiversity. This resulted in 2.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions, equivalent to the annual fossil fuel emissions of India. Under the 2021 Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use, 141 countries committed to collectively halt and reverse forest loss by 2030. Realizing this commitment will require a consistent decline in forest loss every year for the rest of the decade, a decline that is not yet happening in the tropics as a whole. As the country with the most primary rainforest to begin with, Brazil consistently tops the list for the most primary forest loss. Over 40% of tropical primary forest loss in 2021 occurred in Brazil, a total of 1.5 million hectares. Primary forest loss in Brazil is especially concerning given new evidence that the Amazon rainforest is losing resilience and may be closer to a tipping point than previously thought, where the interactions between deforestation, climate change and fires lead to irreversible transformation of massive areas of the Amazon into a savanna. This would not only result in huge amounts of biodiversity loss and carbon emissions, but also disrupt precipitation patterns critical for agricultural production. All of us know of the World Wide Web, commonly known as WWW. In fact, it forms the basis for almost all modern communication. What would you say if I told you that forest ecosystems use what is called the Wood Wide Web? This is the subject of Dr. Suzanne Simard's path-breaking work of over 3 decades, in which she has conclusively established that trees communicate with each other via fungal networks to share information, resources, and even warn each other of dangers like diseases and pests. This is true not just of trees of the same species, but also of trees of different species. It has also been conclusively established that stable, healthy, biodiverse systems are far more resilient and adaptable to unforeseen changes. Every ecosystem is held together in balance by what is known as a keystone species, similar to the way a keystone in architecture holds the entire structure in place. Deforestation and forest degradation have led to habitat loss for such species and thus the disturbance of this delicate balance. Single cropping or monocultures, primarily in modern agriculture, are therefore very susceptible to diseases, pests, fires, and a whole lot of threats. A case in point is the dramatic reduction in bee populations. In the past few years, almost 90% of the bee population has been wiped out. The greatest contribution of bees and other pollinators is the pollination of nearly 3/4 of the plants that protect 90% of the world's food. Sadly, due to habitat loss, biodiversity loss, pollution, spraying of pesticides, etc., their numbers have declined drastically, It is estimated that if bees were to completely disappear, humanity would have food only for just 4 years. Furthermore, modern agriculture has laid emphasis only on certain types of food and within them certain varieties, thus losing genetic diversity, which can create problems as we deal with changing weather patterns. As per the last report of the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, more than 40,000 assessed species are threatened with extinction, and more than 40% of plant species are at the risk of extinction. We still don't fully understand the complex balances in nature and the interdependence of species and ecosystems. However, given that we depend on nature for almost all our needs, food, medicines, clothing, shelter, minerals, and so on, and the global population is expected to stabilize at 10 billion by 2050, biodiversity loss can have serious implications on food security and therefore socio-political stability. AQI, or Air Quality Index, is a metric for reporting daily air quality with the objective of informing people about how the local air quality impacts their health. The Environmental Protection Agency calculates the AQI for 5 major air pollutants, for which national air quality standards have been established to safeguard public health. These are ground level ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. The higher the AQI value, the greater the level of air pollution and the more serious the health concerns. There are 2 recently published scientific studies I would like to talk about very briefly. In February 2021, new research from Harvard University, in collaboration with the University of Birmingham, the University of Leicester, and University College London, found that more than 8 million people died in 2018 from fossil fuel pollution, significantly higher than previous research suggested, meaning that air pollution from burning fossil fuels like coal and diesel was responsible for about 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. In other words, the world loses 15 people per minute just to poor air quality. A scientific paper published in the journal Environment International in January 2021 found that air pollution significantly raises the risk of infertility. The analysis of 18,000 couples in China found that those living with moderately higher levels of small particle pollution had a 20% greater risk of infertility. While infertility affects many millions of couples around the world, relatively little research has been done on the impact of air pollution. However, dirty air is already known to increase the risk of other aspects of reproduction, including premature birth and low birth weight. Common levels of nitrogen dioxide are as bad as smoking in raising the risk of miscarriage, and pollution particles have been found on the fetal side of placentas. The actual research for these studies was conducted prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, which we all know primarily impacts the lungs and a person's ability to breathe. This, combined with poor air quality in many of the world's cities, is a very serious public health concern. Carbon emissions are possibly the most commonly known and talked about metric when it comes to discussions about the causes of global warming and other climate issues. And carbon is primarily emitted by the burning of fossil fuels for energy, transportation, other industrial activities, and deforestation. Carbon dioxide levels today are higher than at any point in at least the past 800,000 years. CO2 emissions from human activities have caused the concentration in the Earth's atmosphere to go up from about 275 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution to more than 422 ppm today as we speak. It is estimated that in the business as usual scenario, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere could reach 550 ppm by 2050. If CO2 concentrations continue to rise unabated, global temperatures will increase, the glaciers will melt, and sea levels will rise. This will have devastating effects, such as hunger, as global food systems come under pressure, lack of fresh water, destruction of habitats and species loss, and rising sea levels making large parts of the world uninhabitable. According to the Carbon Majors database, a report published by the Carbon Disclosure Project, just 100 companies across the world are responsible for 71% of global greenhouse gas emissions that have led to global warming. According to a study conducted by the organization, over half of global emissions can be traced back to 25 companies and entities. And research by Oxfam International reveals that the world's richest 10% produce around half of all emissions. We have all been hearing or reading about global warming and the fact that the ice sheets are melting and sea levels are rising. At first look, it doesn't seem like such a big deal. After all, what difference does a degree Celsius here or there make? On an average day, if it is 25 degrees Celsius, how does it matter if it is now 25.5 degrees Celsius or 26 degrees? Thing is, when we are talking about the planet as a whole, every decimal point of temperature increase has serious implications on weather systems, precipitation patterns, species extinctions, which in turn impact lives, livelihoods, and food production. This Earth's surface continues to significantly warm up, with recent global temperatures being the hottest in the past 2,000 plus years. The year 2020 tied with 2016 for the hottest year on record since record keeping began in 1880. The change in global surface temperature as compared to the pre-industrial baseline has been 0.85 degrees Celsius. At present, South Asia is going through an unprecedented heat wave, and temperatures are expected to touch 55 or 60 degrees Celsius in some areas. In fact, my home city of Delhi has touched 49 degrees Celsius, which is absolutely unprecedented. This will be the hottest summer in the past 120 plus years. Last year, the west coast of the US and Canada experienced unprecedented temperatures and what is known as the heat dome, a term that most of us probably heard for the very first time. The key point to note here is the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, the lower limit of warming agreed in the Paris Agreement. Exceeding this in the long term will lead to potentially irreversible damage, such as rising sea levels and both the warming and acidification of oceans. UN meteorologists say that the average global temperature could exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels as soon as 2026. Very closely related to global temperature rise is the impact on sea ice. Sea ice is simply frozen ocean water. It forms, grows, and melts in the ocean. In contrast, icebergs, glaciers, ice sheets, and ice shelves all originate on land. Sea ice occurs in both the Arctic and Antarctic. According to the NSIDC, the National Snow and Ice Data Center, on average, sea ice covers about 25 million square kilometers of the Earth, or about 2.5 times the area of Canada. Sea ice has a bright surface, so much of the sunlight that strikes it is reflected back into space. As a result, areas covered by the sea don't absorb much solar energy, so temperatures in the polar regions remain relatively cool. As gradually warming temperatures melt sea ice over time, fewer bright surfaces are available to reflect sunlight back into space, causing more solar energy to get absorbed at the surface and raising temperatures further. Even a small increase in temperature can lead to greater warming over time, making the polar regions the most sensitive areas to climate change on Earth. But you may ask, the poles are so far away from me. Why does sea ice matter? Very briefly, these are the main reasons why sea ice is important. The first one, which I just mentioned, is that it reflects sunlight back into space, an effect known as albedo, and helps to keep the Earth cool. Second, it influences the Earth's weather patterns in multiple ways. If you recall, the polar vortexes which occurred in the recent past over North America and parts of Europe were caused by unusual heating of the poles, causing unstable weather patterns and severe cold. Third, it keeps methane underground. Scientists have long known that the Arctic tundra and marine sediments contain large frozen deposits of methane, posing a climate risk if they thaw and release this potent greenhouse gas. And last but not least, the Arctic supports native peoples and native wildlife. I'd like to quote a recent development relating to sea ice. The world's largest known iceberg, A68A, with an area of nearly 6,000 square kilometers and holding about 1 trillion tons of ice, carved from Antarctica in July 2017. By April 2021, in less than 4 years, the mega iceberg had completely melted away, releasing more than 1.5 billion tons of fresh water into the ocean every single day at the height of its melting. Scientists had originally estimated that the iceberg would take about a decade to melt, and this happened in less than 4 years. They're now assessing the long-term implications of this event. I've just touched upon a couple of salient points with respect to each of these indicators. There is an enormous amount of information and literature available if any of you would like to get into the details. All these climate indicators are symptomatic of a fundamental problem which seems to have disturbed the natural equilibrium and has serious implications on the way we all live and work. I'd like to now focus on a few reasons why things are the way they are. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but like the climate indicators, provides valuable insights. Our current economic models traditionally place a higher value on returns or revenues that can be realized in the short term vis-a-vis the long term. In 2012, McKinsey conducted a study to understand and explain the market economics of deforestation and why it makes so-called economic sense to cut down a forest rather than leave it standing. They found that as agricultural commodity prices have risen, the opportunities that have emerged for alternative uses of forested land are far more lucrative. For example, a palm oil plantation with typical productivity can generate an NPV of revenues ranging from $5,000 to $17,000 per hectare. Compare and contrast this with the expected returns from generating revenues from REDD, which is the UN REDD program, from the UN REDD credits on preserved forest, which are estimated to have an NPV of just $2,750. This gap in valuations becomes even more stark if we consider mining for metals and minerals. Please remember, this study was conducted about a decade earlier, and the gap between the returns would have increased, if not stayed the same, due to increased population and commercial pressures. It is estimated that to meet the 2030 demand for food, animal feed, and fuel, 175 million to 220 million hectares of additional cropland would be required. With our modern lifestyles and conveniences, all of us have a sizable carbon footprint. At the moment, there are limited offset models available. In fact, the world generates 2 billion tons of waste annually, which is a lot of which is going into our oceans. Another worrying statistic is that oceans will carry more plastic than fish by weight by 2050. Earth Overshoot Day is an interesting concept. This is the calculated illustrative calendar date on which humanity's resource consumption for the year exceeds the Earth's capacity to regenerate those resources for the year. For 2021, the Earth Overshoot Day was 29th July.
Okay, so I think that bit is clear. So I'm going to get into the structure of
for the whole year.
All right, so
by the end of July, and the consumption for the rest of the year was
just to put an end note to it.
In other words,
on behalf of Eaton,
on an Earth overdraft.
We welcome you all to join our doctorate in business administration, awarded by Guillermo Marconi University. It's going to be an incredible journey, and we wish you all the best, and we hope to see you in the program. I'm Dr. Vivek, I'm the Dean at Eaton Business School. Thank you very much for your patience. I hope I was able to provide value and information with this webinar.
To capital, technology, management practices, etc. Now, you may ask, as learners of business management, or as people in business, or even as employees of an enterprise, what does all this have to do with me, the state of the planet, or the reasons that things the reasons that things are the way they are? I'm minding my own business, living my life in my country or my city. How does this impact me at all? Why should I care about what's happening with the climate? Why should I care about topics like climate change or sustainability or the circular economy? Looking back at the 6 indicators I've spoken about, each of them connects with our daily lives, our businesses, and our capacity to live and work. For instance, when we talk about poor air quality directly impacts health. So whether in your personal capacity or as an employer, you would see health insurance costs and employee absentee days rising, while perhaps productivity gets adversely impacted. And as a business, you may also view this as an opportunity to come up with an innovative air purifying solution, or maybe perhaps you'd introduce an innovative insurance solution. Or if you work in the food industry, deforestation, habitat, and biodiversity loss would be a serious concern, as these directly impact future food production, especially with deteriorating soil conditions. So then you would need to adopt eco-friendly farming methods or explore avenues like agroforestry. In the past few years, the world has been either burning or drowning, whether we speak about forest fires in different parts of the world or superstorms or flooding in other parts of the world. As an individual, you would need to think about how to mitigate the impacts for your family. Perhaps talk to your elected representatives about climate adaptation and mitigation. As a business, you would need to take these risks into account while planning for the next new product or create innovative products and services which will have a significant demand in the future. So if you reflect deeply on the various aspects of changing climate, you will realize there are far-reaching implications in daily lives, both personal and professional. The truth is, exploitation of natural resources has front-loaded benefits and back-loaded costs. Now I shift to more compelling reasons on why businesses should care. As climate issues take center stage, important stakeholders are demanding climate action. Employees and customers want to know if a business is being conducted ethically. What is the environmental impact of sourcing raw materials? Have any communities been adversely affected? Have sustainable methods been used? Have the relevant laws and regulations been complied with? And so on. In short, it's about responsible corporate citizenship. Similarly, investors are concerned, and rightly so, about the risks and rewards of conducting business. While environmental legislations and requirements need to be complied with, and climate risks to the enterprise mitigated, proactive climate action can also act as a differentiator in the marketplace as awareness and concern about these issues gains traction among customers and other stakeholders. Over the past few years, capital flows have significantly shifted towards businesses who follow a robust ESG agenda, where ESG refers to environment, social, and governance, a topic which really merits its own full session. A few quick stats on capital flows. ESG funding is expected to touch $50 trillion by 2025, up from $35 trillion at present. Green issuance drove the green bond market to just over $500 billion USD in 2021. The value of global carbon markets surged to a record $851 billion in 2021, primarily from the EU's emissions trading system. The sale of sustainable products in the US alone is estimated at $150 billion. In business, we all know that in very simple terms, profit equals revenues minus costs. One basic question to ponder is, what is cost? At present, costs are defined as the payments made to various providers of goods and services, which further form an input for producing the goods and services which are then sold in the marketplace. But what about cost to earth or cost to society? What has it actually cost to produce the goods and services? Can we place a value on the deforestation or the habitat loss that was deemed necessary, or the pollution of air and water that was incidental to the activity, or the displacement of a community that was considered to be in the way? How long can we continue to conduct business, produce and consume goods and services, and live our daily lives without considering these so-called hidden or unrecognized costs? I suppose it is time to change the economic paradigms of how we value businesses and goods and services. In 2015, all the UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which are an urgent call for action by all countries in a global partnership. These SDGs recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Among almost all leading global organizations today, when you read their annual reports, are aligned to one or more of the SDGs. Going forward, no strategic agenda of any public entity will have any significance if it doesn't expressly state its climate agenda in conjunction with the SDGs. Based on the rethink of existing paradigms, combined with the guidance of the UN SDGs, a new economic model is emerging and gaining traction: the fourth sector, or for-benefit enterprises. The economies in most countries comprise three sectors: the public sector, or the government, the private sector, or the for-profit businesses, and the non-profit sector, or civil society, charities, etc. The fourth sector sits at the confluence of the three traditional sectors and combines market-based approaches of the private sector with the social and environmental aims of the public and not-for-profit sectors to address pressing problems. In other words, these enterprises take a holistic view of problems or issues to come up with solutions that can benefit all stakeholders. Let me share with you a couple of examples of case studies. The clothing industry is responsible for a whopping 10% of global carbon emissions, more than the combined emissions of international flights and maritime shipping. If business continues as usual, the clothing industry is expected to need 3 times as many resources to keep up with consumer demand by 2050. If we are to keep Earth livable in the future, the clothing industry must change. One company that has been bucking the trend and has been a pioneer in sustainably conducting business much before it became a buzzword is Patagonia, a multi-million-dollar outdoor apparel company founded in 1973. It has held ethical and environmental issues close to its core ever since. Starting out as a conventional for-profit enterprise, Patagonia became a registered benefit corporation, or a B Corp, in 2012, and in 2018, changed its mission statement to amplify this directive to say, we are in the business to save our home planet. To qualify as a B Corp, a business must have an explicit social or environmental mission and a legally binding fiduciary responsibility to take into account the interests of workers, the community, and the environment, as well as its shareholders. Patagonia is guided by the principles you see on your screen. 1% for the planet, a self-imposed tax of 1% of revenues, irrespective of profit, which are donated to worthy environmental causes every year. Build the best product with no unnecessary harm. Designing and fabricating the highest quality of products which are made from reusable and recyclable materials, are durable, non-obsolete, easy to repair, and have a minimal impact throughout the supply chain. Conduct operations causing no unnecessary harm, but continuously seeking to reduce the environmental footprint and impact of operations in water use, water quality, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, chemical use, toxicity, and waste. Sharing best practices with other companies, including direct competitors, in order to implement solutions to the environmental crisis so it may produce a material positive impact. Transparency in providing information on the environmental impact of their different product lines based on the best science and data practically available. And lastly, providing a supportive work environment. For example, Patagonia has 50% of the workforce and 47% of senior leaders are women. The second case study I would like to present today is an enterprise that I have co-founded, the Sacred Groves. The Sacred Groves is a community interest company incorporated in England and Wales, driven by the purpose of protecting our planet's natural habitats. Our platform has been built to enable millions of guardians, who we define as environmentally sensitive individuals and companies, to seamlessly participate in the process of conservation. Our mission is to protect natural habitats and inspire meaningful change. Our aspiration by 2025 is to protect and conserve at least 100,000 acres of natural habitats with the support of a flourishing community of 500,000 guardians. So what is the problem that Sacred Groves is tackling? Deforestation and forest degradation continue to take place at alarming rates, as I discussed in the earlier part of my presentation. According to the UN REDD program, which was launched in 2008, deforestation and forest degradation account for approximately 11% of carbon emissions, more than the entire global transportation sector and second to only the energy sector. Halting and reversing deforestation could deliver up to 30% of the climate solution making forests one of the most cost-effective and immediate solutions to climate change. So how does the Sacred Groves model work? We secure natural habitats through either direct acquisition or long-term contracts with landowners and governments. Then we map them using geospatial imaging and convert them using advanced analytics into virtual sacred grove clusters, or SGCs, essentially creating a digital twin of the area. These SGCs are available for a fee on our web and mobile applications for monitoring and for support by our guardians. Each SGC is available at a price point of £40 for a 10-year term and can also be gifted on birthdays, anniversaries, and other special occasions, making this a meaningful planet-positive gift. We also aspire to become a social network for the environmentally conscious with the recent introduction of our squads feature. In fact, recently in March 2022, the entire graduating cohort of Eton Business School was gifted a Sacred Groves cluster. We have taken the effort out of habitat protection by doing all the heavy lifting, which includes legal contracts, taxation, maintenance services, technology, community engagement, marketing, payments, etc., etc. In just a few minutes, our guardians can advance their conservation journey. In short, we are trying to democratize conservation and make it mainstream. As I mentioned a short while earlier, Sacred Groves is incorporated as a community interest company. This company structure was carefully selected for its unique features. Asset lock means that the company can never change the stated end use of the assets it acquires or supports. In the case of Sacred Groves, we support forests and natural habitats with the express purpose of protection and conservation. We can never change this. In fact, even if the company ceases to exist at any point, by regulatory mandate, the assets of the company would be transferred to another entity, a similar entity, which also has to remain true to purpose. In other words, the natural habitats are protected for posterity. Secondly, the company has to periodically declare to the regulator, in our case, Companies House UK, how it has served the community and stayed aligned to its stated purpose. Finally, CICs are allowed to make surpluses to ensure continued financial stability, and investors are rewarded with modest dividends in order to attract capital. Like Patagonia and Sacred Groves, there is a surge in companies all over the world trying to establish the fact that good business or profitability and sustainable all-rounded development are not contradictions. In fact, they will have to go hand in hand if businesses are to survive in the long term. I would encourage all of you on this call to look at climate change as an opportunity to accelerate innovation, change business paradigms, and create value for all stakeholders. I, for one, am deeply inspired by the opportunities presented by the next few decades. I'd like to close with a Margaret Mead quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. We are all citizens of planet Earth, and it is our responsibility to live and work sustainably. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. I wish you all success and thank you. Now I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. So initially when COVID-19 struck and a whole lot of countries went into lockdown, it was expected that there would be a positive impact on the climate. Initially, a lot of cities saw clearer air, saw the benefits of the pause, so to say. And it was actually called the anthropause. But as the economy started to open up over time, we saw that all those benefits kind of got wiped out, and we were back to the poor air quality. We were back to so to say, business as usual. Another thing which happened with the COVID-19 pandemic was the increase in the amount of trash that was generated, whether it was disposable masks, it was the PPE kits, and the whole lot of trash which came out of medical systems. Everybody was wearing a mask. So those were adverse impacts which happened. But one thing which the COVID-19 pandemic, I hope, has taught us, that as we have pushed nature to its limit, this has been one impact where pathogens have jumped species. So we need to be very careful when we start pushing nature to the limit. So I hope this is a wake-up call in that sense.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. And we have another question from Geetanjali Krishna. Can you suggest small steps with which we as individuals can adopt a more planet-friendly life?
So I have a very simple 3-part mantra, which I try to, which I try to implement in my own life. It's very simple. First, be aware. Be aware of everything that is going on around you in terms of what is the impact on climate, what is happening in your community, what is happening in your workplace, what is happening with, say, legislation around your area. Just be aware of things around you. The second thing is being mindful. Be mindful of every action that you take. What is it that you're doing? Am I adversely impacting something? Can I do something in a better way? For example, instead of taking that plastic bottle of water, can I carry my own bottle to my workplace or when I'm traveling? Or something as simple as when I'm going shopping for groceries, can I carry my own bag instead of taking plastic bags from the shop? So second one is be mindful in every aspect of your life. And the third one is be hopeful. The whole discussion that I had about the climate indicators, why things are the way they are, they can all seem very depressing, very upsetting. And the climate problem really seems so large. It seems so insurmountable. If we are hopeful, we know that there is power in the power of one. Each one do one, and you can have this huge multiplier effect, and therefore be hopeful. It is not insurmountable. It is possible to deal with this. So this simple 3-part mantra, if everyone starts to implement in their lives, we can have a ginormous ripple effect, which will make a big difference.
Exactly. And adding to that, we've got another question from Mr. Luther. What about the sea? That's the question.
What about the sea? The sea, the planet, all of it is one huge ecosystem. It is just, the planet is our home. There is no planet B. This is what we need to take care of. As citizens of the planet, it is our responsibility, each one of our responsibility, to take care of our own sphere of influence. So we all have to make an effort. We all have to make a difference.
Exactly. There is, Geetanjali has said, that's a great advice. Thank you. And I love the idea of power of one. We've got one more question from Emmanuel. In Africa, where illegal mining is the order of the day, what is the way forward?
Well, now illegal mining is something which will very honestly have to be dealt with by governments, by legislation, and also by the people who live in and around that area. Very simply, if there is something illegal happening in your house, let me make this a personal example. We all live in homes, right? If somebody illegally comes into your home or barges into your house, what is it that you're going to do? You're going to defend your home, right? Now, laws and legal systems exist to protect from these things. Now, the people who live in and around these areas have got to stand up and say, this is not okay. Have got to make a difference, have got to go back to their elected representatives and say, this is not fine. In fact, I'm reminded of a case in Ecuador where there was a proposal for mining in their part of the Amazon rainforest. The tribal chief of the area, she led a protest and filed a case in the country's highest court and protested against that mining activity because it would have led to deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. And the amazing thing is she won. So it is always possible to step in, to force the authorities to not allow these things to happen.
Thank you. We have another question from Mudao again. Do you think the reduction of carbon emission during COVID-19 era are contributing to the recent changes in climate behavior? Example, continuous rainfalls across the season.
Unfortunately, we did not see any significant reduction in carbon emissions. It was momentary. And then, as I mentioned to you, we are now at 422 ppm, which is higher than last year, which was, I think, around 410 or something last year. So it has unfortunately not made an impact. It is back at very high levels. And in fact, the levels are climbing. So just to give you an analogy, supposing you have a bathtub and the tap is running on full and the bathtub is overflowing. What is it that you do? Right now, what the world is doing is grabbing towels to try and soak it up. The first thing we need to do is turn off the tap. That is the problem with carbon emissions. We are not reducing emissions fast enough. The emissions are just skyrocketing. Sorry, Balja, I'm not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, okay. Now I can.
Thank you. Wellington from Zimbabwe has asked, what can we, a small group, to do make sure sea and climate change is minimized and the benefits thereafter so the rest can follow or copy in the day-to-day living?
So, as I said, everybody has a role to play. In fact, we have documented a whole lot of inspirational stories on the Sacred Groves website in our blog section, which showcases all the positive climate action that individuals and communities have taken to make a difference in their sphere of influence. Wherever you are, whatever you can do definitely has an impact. And as I said, each little drop is what makes the ocean. And as everybody makes a difference, it will definitely have a larger impact. If I can quote a couple of stories from the blog posts where we've showcased cases of positive climate action. For example, there is this gentleman in Bangalore who was a techie, and he realized that the lakes of Bangalore are beginning to dry up, and the country and the city is suffering from water shortage. He took it upon himself to try and restore these lakes. He started with one, and today I think has restored more than 100 lakes and is now restoring lakes all over the country. So when you start, there is definitely a ripple effect. Another case that I know of from the Gambia is where this lady started converting plastic trash into products, into handbags, into mats, into a whole lot of products, and was able to create a market for it. Today's sustainable products have a huge market. Upcycled products, they all have a huge market. So wherever you are, you can influence that space.
Thank you for those examples. Now, Arun Mathur from Bombay has asked, what, in your opinion, is the outcome of COP26 at Glasgow?
So there were 2 or 3 things which I would say were positives in COP26. I mean, we have to realize that for so many countries and so many governments to come together and to agree on certain landmark decisions is a very big deal. The first one was the methane, the agreement on methane. Now, so far, we've been talking mostly about carbon emissions and so on and so forth. Methane is a greenhouse gas, which is 80 times more potent than CO2 when it comes to global warming. So countries across the globe agreed on keeping methane levels down. So this was a big one. Secondly, they also agreed on limiting deforestation. The third one, which was important for me, was sorry, it's just slipped my mind. The second was deforestation. They came together. And the very fact that they are moving ahead and at least they are meeting to make these things happen, that is a step forward. The next COP is now in Egypt, and the one after that will be in the UAE. So there are, good things happening. It is taking time. Oh yes, the third one was about phasing out coal. So at least a start has been made. Coal is the dirtiest of all the fossil fuels because of the emissions that it releases. So these three aspects is what comes to top of the mind when it comes to COP26.
All right. So we've got one more question from another attendee. How does the war affect the nature?
War is always a bad thing. I mean, in many, many ways. Well, so for the first thing, of course, the cost to human life. Secondly, the emissions when you're bombing cities, when you're moving arms and ammunition into countries, obviously the kind of emissions which are happening. The third is now Russia has been the pipeline or the major source of energy for most of Europe. And while Europe is moving towards green energy and moving away from traditional fossil fuels, this sudden disruption to power, to energy supplies, there is a danger that they may go back to coal and dirty fuels. So this is a real danger because it takes time for the green transition. So this is a fear that has been talked about in press and so on, saying that we have to move faster towards the green transition. This could, in a way, if you look at it as a silver lining, hopefully the world will move away from fossil fuels faster and move faster towards green energy sources. But that's a hope. But of course, supply lines are disrupted. The worst is, of course, the loss to human life, the loss to nature, the loss to, on so many, many counts. It's extremely, extremely sad.
Exactly. And one more question from Mudao. Does the earth, plants, animals, ocean, etc. need a savior, or it is alive in its nature?
Very honestly, I think we as humans give ourselves too much of importance. The planet will go on. It's really survival for us to make sure that our species lives and survives and thrives. Really, I mean, we are actually nobody to say that we are saving the earth or we are saving nature. It's more about living harmoniously with nature. Whether we survive or not, the planet will go on.
Thank you. Now we've got a message from Suleiman. Thank you so much for this great presentation. What has actually touched my heart so much has to do with the sacred groves. I have been thinking around this area for some time now, and as one of these areas that can be tapped into an ecosystem at large.
I'm sorry, I lost your audio. Please, if you could repeat the last part.
I have been thinking around this area for some time now, and as one of the areas that can be tapped into protect our environment and ecosystem at large. How can I go about this?
So, I mean, I would encourage you to take a look at our website, which is www.sacredgroves.earth. Take a look at our website. Encourage people around you to take meaningful actions. If you like what we do support us by becoming a guardian of the sacred groves. Do support us by raising awareness that natural spaces need to be conserved and protected. Do support us by gifting planet positive gifts. It does not necessarily have to be sacred grove clusters. It could be a plant. It could be, helping someone to maybe support whatever diversity they have in their area. Small planet positive actions can go a long, long way.
Exactly. We've got a question from Kugan Pillai. How do we make alternate energy accessible to the masses? Example, solar.
Solar energy today is probably cheaper to produce than any fossil fuel. At least I'm aware of what the thing is in India. You can have solar panels on the roof of your house, connect to the grid. So then you are using, renewable solar energy, and you may probably be even giving back to the grid. Another thing which is easy to do is a solar cooker. It's something my family has started doing a few months back. So we purchased a solar cooker from India. I brought it here. I live here in Dubai. It's a very, very simple device, and we are using it every day for our cooking. So basically, it's a box which has a mirror on one end. I put it out in the sun. I put in a box of raw uncooked rice. And in about an hour or two, my rice is cooked, my dal is cooked, my potatoes can be boiled, my tomatoes can be boiled. It's very, very simple. It's just about looking for those, for those things which are easy to adopt at the beginning. So solar is definitely very easy to do. Another thing you can do is have LED lights in your home, which consume less energy. So they're more energy efficient. Do not use lights when you don't need it. Switch off lights. It's something I think we've all been taught ever since we were little. So small changes, again, what I said, be aware, be mindful, be hopeful. So when you start applying this mantra to every aspect of your life, the solutions will just present themselves.
Definitely. We've got another question from Amos. In Africa, and in particularly my country, the entire population depends on the charcoal use as source of energy for cooking in homes, capital cities, urban areas, and villages. The electricity tariffs are high, which has made it costly to use. How can you advise the government and people from using charcoal and firewood, which affects the environment?
Now, this is an issue really for governments and for lawmakers to explore and to, really figure out what they would like to do. But solar is, I suppose, the way to go. Solar energy, wind energy, all these, all these technologies are now easily available. Now, what are the challenges that face the government is something I think which would be outside my remit. They would probably need to consult with experts in the area and then figure what is the best way forward for their country, for their specific problems in their areas. So the technologies exist, but what works for which country, for which city, that is something the lawmakers will really need to explore and discuss with experts. Sorry, Barija, your audio is gone again.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for raising that out. We've got one more question in chat. So she says, Jamal, I think, he says, I think the lockdown had little no effect to climate change. It even increased more emissions after companies tried to recover all that they lost during the lockdown. But my question is, Africa seems to less concerned because we seem to have enough forest, but this is a global issue. How can individual do to support forest recovery? The heat these days are just exceeding high. Of course, things will not always be the same as our world is just getting to an end as we look for higher citizen far beyond the earth. Till then, let's make this place a better place. So with the question, they have ended with a good note.
Sorry?
So there was a question in between. How can an individual do support forest recovery? The heat these days are just exceeding high.
It really probably starts with again, as I said, the action that you can take. Have you got a garden which is full of trees and bushes? The first step. Second step, the area that you live in. Can you speak to your elected representative and say, we need more trees here, or we need to have a way in which the local ecosystem can become more green? Every area, again, has its own specific needs. And one thing to be careful of when we come to things like tree planting is to make sure that only indigenous species are planted, because invasive species can create more problems than they solve. So if you create, or if like-minded people get together and put pressure on your elected representatives and say, we need to deal with climate change. What is it that we are doing? All the legislations which are coming about in countries today have come about after years and years of climate activism. All over the world, there are people who are protesting against governments and saying that we need climate action. That is how you change the system. You also change it, of course, as I said, with your own sphere of influence. Now, a couple of things that I want to say, which are amazing initiatives. At least 2 countries I have read about have decreed that nature is a legal person and has rights which we as humans cannot encroach. So those are, changes which are coming about. Or I think it was France which has introduced a law which says that you cannot commit ecocide. Now, this is a new word. When I read it for the first time, I was really amazed, because ecocide means you're destroying some part of nature. So these kind of initiatives, and there is so much more awareness now. Write about it in your local press. Create awareness in your locality, with the people who live around you, in your workplace. Awareness makes a lot of difference. When more and more people are aware, when more and more people are taking individual climate action, it will definitely make a difference.
Thank you once again. We've got one more question from Kaluba. Environmental distractions in South Africa is one of the higher side because of too much dependency on forest. How best can this issue be addressed to ensure sustainability, even at least possibly marginalized societies? Because developed countries seem to be fully engaged into addressing these issues than we are here in sub-Sahara Africa.
So as I was mentioning in my presentation, the UN RED is a very, very powerful and an interesting program. So what they do is they have something called RED credits, right? A lot of countries are availing those credits where, they are reimbursed for protecting their forests and natural habitats. That is an institutional solution. Now, as Sacred Groves, one discussion we are having with various governments actually deals with, these past 2-3 questions that you have asked. What we are talking to governments about is, now to conserve an area is a cost for any government, right? So what we are saying is we would like to place these natural habitats on the platform, on the Sacred Groves platform, and make it available to people all over the globe to support financially. So in this case, the way the arrangement works is the government owns the land, the country owns that land. We only act as a medium by which global support for those forests and natural resources can be made available, right? So in that case, it's a win-win. The government does not need to worry about financing or protecting the area. The funds that are raised can be used for economic development of the people who live in and around those forests. The world at large is able to support and conserve natural capital, which is, again, planet positive action. So everybody wins. Now, when we started with this topic on profitability and sustainability, it does not have to be a zero-sum game. Everybody can benefit. So that is why the sacred rose mechanism is what we thought of for protection of natural resources, for protection of existing natural habitats. This is where actually the whole concept and the whole idea came about. We are leveraging technology. We are making sure that area is protected. So these are ongoing conversations. We are hopeful that these will fructify as we go along.
All right. And we've got a follow-up question to the solar energy question from Kugan Pillai. So he says, access to the alternate energies are expensive at the moment. Do we consider subsidies to the majority of the communities?
I think most countries have subsidies for renewable energy sources, but I would not be aware of the specific laws and so on and so forth. But today, if you want to install solar panels in your home, I think there's about a 4 or 5 years payback. So in the long term, it makes economic sense also to move to a solar energy source.
Thank you. And I think one last question from Q&A from Molcotes. Usually profitability has to do with greedy human and business behavior. Many argue that companies can sustainable and profitable, but this is really possible. Is this really possible? Should we redefine profitability in a different way and to move to a different economic and social system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the current economic paradigms do not serve humanity or the planet very well. So which is where I have spoken at length about the fourth sector enterprises, where we have to take a holistic view of the way things are, of communities, of the planet, of the ways of doing business. And the case study that I presented of Patagonia, I think it's very, very inspirational. And going forward, all business entities will have to follow these kind of paradigms where they take care of sustainability, they take care of communities, they take care of their employees and workers. Those, the earlier so-called economic models are, I think, gradually going to become relics of the past. We have to innovate, we have to move ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insightful session. Like everyone has mentioned in the group and chat, it was very well researched and very well insightful. Thank you, Mrs. Monisha, on that note, and to all the attendees for asking very wonderful questions which added value to it. We also welcome questions based on any courses that you require. As I mentioned at the start, we at Eton Business School, we have executive studies that you can pursue. We have executive MBA, we have professional diploma, postgraduate diploma. So if you have any questions related to that, you may ask now as well. We've got a couple asked about DBA, which is Doctorate in Business Administration. Kindly share your email ID, your contact number and your name so that we will get back to you with all the details required. So please do share in the chat box so we will get back to you shortly. And thank you to Bello and Matshuba Melepa for sharing your requests in Q&A. We have recorded and we will get back to you on that note very shortly. Please share your email, contact number. And also some of you have asked if we can connect with Mrs. Monisha. Yes, definitely you can connect with her in LinkedIn. I will share her connection link on the quick note. Just give me 1 second. Right, I'm going to drop the connection link on the chat box. You can click on this and you can connect with Mrs. Monisha. And as well as if you have any queries which is after this webinar, you can always write to Ms. Bhavna or Mr. Said. I will write their email address as well in the chat box. So we have 2 email address. You can either write to Ms. Bhavna or Mr. Said on that note, Or if you prefer a call, or if you want to connect with WhatsApp, definitely you can also call or WhatsApp and connect with Miss Bhavna on this number. Let me give you the number as well. So you can either connect with us through this number or email, or we can connect back with you if you provide your email address, your contact number and your name. So we've received a couple of email address here and some phone numbers. Thank you. And yes, this session is recorded. We will share it with all of you after this session or shortly. And like mentioned, is presentation as well as it will be shared with all the attendees. Again, there was one question at the start. Is there any attendance document for this webinar? Right. So right after we end this session, towards the end of the session, we will be sharing a feedback form. We would love to hear your feedback and your experience or key takeaways from this webinar. So please do fill in the feedback form, give your opinion, and if you have any suggestions or if you want to attend to our future webinars, you can always give your suggestions. We will connect with you and send all the invitations when we have our future webinars as well. So please fill the feedback form. You will be receiving it in your email, and this will act as a confirmation to attendance as well. I can save a couple of minutes if you have any questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, or please share your email address and your contact number so that we can get back to you. Okay, so we have a question. Do you have courses on data science? And we also have, someone has asked about, can we ask more about diplomas? Definitely. So for all these questions, we have diplomas, professional diplomas. We have executive MBA in terms of business analytics. We have a postgraduate diploma. We will get back to you. Please share your email, contact number. I can see emails are coming up, so please keep on. We will get back to you on that. So I can see there are emails coming up. Please, if you can share your contact number, that will be great, and it will be easy to contact you as well.